So I wanted to mention something to follow up on my last video about how, um, or give a vision of how it would look under how God wanted it, which was that if the whole nation is his church and you have a country with religious liberty, how does that work? Well, when it comes to other religions, they can do what they want within reason, obviously not human sacrifice, or you know what I mean. I'm talking about, just people that come here but respect our values, love America, because God's vision was that instead of all these missionaries going out to dangerous countries, people would want to come here. We were the shining city on the hill for that reason. And they would want to come here and then be attracted, and that would naturally pique people's interests into Christianity and our country, all that, okay? So most people would say, well, if you don't have churches, you can't control people to have good values. That's the problem with it. It's not letting God do his work. It's denying the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit, which again, a lot of these pastors do not have, because they only, it's like the written word is the Holy Spirit, and that's just not going to fly with God. Because that's why God will say, I didn't know you, because you didn't know me here. So that's truly what Trump was trying to revitalize without needing a church to do it, which is what God wanted to do. But man continually steps in and says, no, we have to do this, because they think that it's up to them to control society. And if we don't have all these churches, then we don't have order. No, it's God's. It's God's country before it's anybody else's. So if you believe in him, you let him, he will take care of those things better than man can. But the moment man comes in and says, it's the same thing with the Pharisees. They were putting in so many laws that had nothing to do with God, because they were trying to control order, and and what ends up happening is they create no order. Okay, they just cause resentment. You get these Mark Driscolls, all these sick minds that become a faction. The moment you have the structure, you have a faction. A faction that will care more about its bottom dollar, a faction that's going to want to, this is what our church does. And the biggest part that's what's been lost here, is that the church is the nations. I mean, that's clearly obvious in Revelation that the letters to the churches was nations. That's why those letters were going to be for later. The nation of Christians. Is this, some nations have little Christianity, so, they're not really a nation of God. But here has always been that, which is what they wanted to destroy. But the Christians themselves, not meaning to, kind of destroyed it themselves. Because what ends up happening is the more the Protestants build, or the Presbyterians, then the Catholics build. It became this war between who's going to have more churches, who's going to have more Catholic school or Protestant school. And this is all what God didn't want. Why he didn't want the structure. If you don't have the structure, like say you didn't even allow it, because here is where the church is, here is, God will lead people where he wants them to go. if that's what was going on, which is what Jesus wanted the whole time. Because once he's in here, even if you think somebody's lying about that, that's God will judge it. It doesn't mean that you have to have, you know, all these Christian churches in order to show you that you have a Christian nation. It's no, how many people have it in here that are following the shepherd's voice? Because if more people did that, then more people are following the true priest, God. That's the reason there was to be no more hierarchy, because there's no greater teacher than the one in here. If you wanted to have some, you know, leaders here and there, but I think really it was all about learning from others too. I mean, you know, that are Christian, like exactly what they were doing house to house, the apostles. Because from that, because it's not a structure that has to, you know, worry about how it's going to support itself. It's people all giving, which then leads to more people giving. And then any money they would pool together, like a video I posted of this guy who obviously has, you know, a biblical background, and he was going, you know, he was really calling Mark Driscoll out, rightfully so, about, and he said that the priesthood was gotten rid of with the new covenant, the new testament, but man, even in wanting to do their best, think, no, we have to have these churches because we must, that must be what people go to. Or then the other thing they'd worry about, well, is if you have religious liberty and you don't have Christian churches, then you'll have other people going to different religions. No, that's where you leave it in God's hands. And what you would find is you would have more Christians. You would have more, you have home groups, you know, in your communities where it's not some structure that then this is what my identity is. Then say you have some big group of people, well, we're all Christians. We're not, I'm Presbyterian, I'm you know, Protestant, I'm this. Right now, this ecumenical thing, which is just nonsense, okay? That's what they're trying to do. But because they weren't coming from the right place to begin with, it's going to fail. Because again, it's a hierarchy, especially there in Rome, along with all the other hierarchies of the churches, that don't want to scrap everything and start over. And of course they won't. They will keep their heels dug in because they're more about following what they've decided the rules will be rather than God. I don't know if that makes sense, but I can see how that would be what God really, am I saying he's against churches? No, it's just, there's clearly a reason why AA was created, because, and it's not a church, but since that's where God did much of his healing, and I'm not saying he doesn't do healing in other ways, okay? I mean, you know, and most of the country wouldn't agree with me, you know? They would say, no, there's benefit to church. Look at what's happening. Where was the benefit when the nation just ended up going, we didn't completely go downhill, but we went from, at one point in the beginning, 90% Christian to 64%, and still being the biggest Christian nation. But that should have been the red flag, because it became more about competing Protestants with Catholics, and Catholics were just coming in here and all they wanted was control. See, when you don't have that and you don't allow it, Catholic Church can't get in here and the beast can't have any influence. That's why God didn't want it. Because without any churches, say it wasn't allowed, and people just had to follow God or have their church communities in the houses, well, you bypass the beast.